Hello Rayclast, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for the Shatterwarp Assassin. This build was my league starter for the Betrayal League. As with most starter builds, the goal was to make a character that could farm quickly on a low budget to start amassing currency for more extravagant builds. This build met that goal very well, and I can strongly recommend it as a league starter going forward. This build uses the new Winter Orb skill in a cast while channeling Lightning Warp setup for some relaxing one-button gameplay. The clear speed is excellent, and the single target damage is respectable, but the character is extremely squishy, so you'll have to play around dangerous mechanics. No face tanking here. As usual, you can find a Path of Building link in the video description where you can browse all of the gear, passives, and gen setups for this character at your leisure. As should be the goal with most league starting characters, you want characters that are very easy to gear, and this character is no exception. This character has no required unique items, though a Tabula Rasa can certainly be useful for getting you an early 6-link, and you definitely need a 6-link on this character before you switch to that main Winter Orb setup. As you're leveling, I recommend simply using fire traps and flamethrower traps. That's what I did for leveling, and it made a pretty smooth leveling experience before I eventually got my Tabula and switched to the Winter Orb. Your priorities, of course, on the gear are to cap out your resistances, as always, and on this character, since I use nothing but rare items, it is real easy to cap out Chaos Resist, which I definitely recommend for some of the Syndicate stuff that was introduced with Betrayal. That Chaos Res can help out quite a lot, so look for Chaos Res where you can and craft on the nice little hybrid Chaos Res crafts with the new crafting bench, and you shouldn't have any trouble capping out your Chaos Res along with all of your elemental resistances. After your resistances, of course, you want as much life as you can possibly get. Despite being an assassin on the right side and top side of the tree, I ended up with over 6k life on this character, so I had a nice enough pool to keep me safe from the random little hits that would get through while mapping. Any affixes that you have left on your gear after capping out your resistances and getting a bunch of life should just be dedicated to anything that'll increase your damage. That can be spell damage, cold damage, spell crit or crit multi, even pen from things like fossil rolls is good. Next, the one sort of special item you will need is an Essence of Horror gloves. They don't need any particular rolls on them. I literally just used one Essence of Horror on my gloves and crafted life on them and went with that for the whole duration of the character. So really cheap. Those are for your Herald of Ice setup to boost your clear speed. After that, none of the rest is mandatory, but it is things that will definitely help out. I recommend going for a 6-linked staff. This can be really any 6-link staff, just chuck a couple essences of woe on it until you hit something decent, and that's where you put your single target setup, which is another Winter Orb Castle channeling setup. On your jewels, look for life and damage. Any sort of damage rolls will help you out, whether it be spell damage, projectile damage, cold damage, crit multi, anything like that that's applicable to the skills you're using. Now we'll take a look at the Flask Setup I decided to use on this character. Of course, first and foremost, you need a life flask, and I recommend the old tried and true from all of my build guides, the Catalyzed Eternal Life Flask of Staunching. Next, you'll want a Quicksilver of Adrenaline. Move speed affects how quickly your Lightning Warp will warp you, so you want move speed, and it's useful when you're not Lightning Warping as you're running around picking up the gear that drops from enemies. Next, you want a Diamond Flask to ensure the crit reliability of your Herald of Ice chaining through packs. Follow that up with a Basalt Flask just to keep you alive a little better. Somewhere between that Diamond Flask and Basalt Flask, you want some warding and heat suffixes to keep you from being frozen and allow you to run curse maps. And that final flask can be whatever you want, with the final goal being a Dying Sun, as it is excellent for boosting both your clear and single target. For gems, this character uses two main setups, one for clearing and one for single target. We'll start by looking at the clearing setup. The main clearing setup is Winter Orb, Cast While Channeling, Lightning Warp, Less Duration, Greater Multiple Projectiles, and Cold Penetration. I definitely recommend waiting until you have a 6-link, whether that be a Tabula or a rare 6-link, before switching to this Winter Orb setup. I leveled with fire traps and flamethrower traps until I got a Tabula Rasa, because the setup just doesn't really have adequate damage to feel smooth for clearing until you get that 6-link. The other main clearing setup, of course, is your Herald of Ice and your Essence of Horror gloves. Link that with increased critical strikes, increased area of effect, and cold penetration. Somewhere you will also want to stick a Clarity. This gives you enough mana regen that you can just hold down that right click forever and clear away. For your single target setup, you'll be running another Winter Orb setup. This will go in that 6-link staff once you manage to get one. This setup is Winter Orb, Cast While Channeling, Ice Spear, GMP, Cold Penetration, and Controlled Destruction. Then of course you'll also want to stick a Frost Bomb somewhere that you can chuck on tanky targets to chop down their cold resistance. After that, you'll have several open slots open on various pieces of gear. Throw whatever utility setups you want. I recommend a bunch of cast when damage taken setups. Good things to go with cast when damage taken are Temporal Chains, Immortal Call, Frostwall, and whatever else you think will help you stay alive. The passive tree for this character is what I would call a pretty standard crit spellcaster tree. We are an assassin, so of course you're going to be starting as a shadow. If you want, you can start by avoiding crit nodes on the way out in the early leveling, as it's not that reliable unless you have something like Axiom Perpetuums to level with. I recommend heading out through the shadow area and up toward the witch area as quickly as possible for those juicy elemental wheels that are above the witch. If you decide to level with traps like I did on this character before switching to the Winter Orb setup, make sure to grab any trap nodes along the way that are helpful, like Expeditious Munitions or Blast Cascade if you are going the crit route right off the bat. Of course, if you use Fire Trap and Flamethrower Trap like I did, you'll want to grab the Fire Wheel with Heart of Flame above the Witch initially, and then respec over to Heart of Ice later when you actually switch to your Winter Orb setup. I recommend going for all of the crit nodes as soon as possible, especially if you have things like Axiom Perpetuums while leveling, just to make sure you get that Herald of Ice chaining as good as you can, as early as you can, because that is what gives you your main clear speed boost while mapping. Eventually you'll head over into the Templar area, filling out all of the power charges, grabbing whatever elemental damage is around, and I recommend saving that Serpent Stance Staff node, of course, until you actually get your hands on the 6-link staff for your single target setup. Skip that for early clearing when you're just using your wands or scepters or whatever in your dual wielding setup. Regarding your Ascendancy choices, again, we are an assassin, and I recommend starting out with the Ambush and Assassinate node. That 100% more crit chance against enemies on full life is really important for helping your Herald of Ices chain around packs and boosting your clear speed, so grab that for your normal lab. In Cruel and Merciless labs, you're going to want to grab Unstable Infusion and Deadly Infusion. Again, this will grab a bunch of base crit to all of your skills, of course, but most importantly your Herald of Ice, helping it chain around, and ensuring that your Winter Orb will blast stuff for that initial shatter as you are warping around the map. Save Opportunistic for your Uber Lab. It's not a huge deal, but that 20% movement speed does make your Lightning Warps even faster, so it will boost your clear speed even higher at the end of the day. For your Pantheon choices, Soul of the Brine King is definitely a must-have on this character, as we don't have any built-in stun immunity or avoidance, so we need to make sure we can't be chain stunned, and I strongly recommend capturing the Glace upgrade for that increased block and stun recovery. That'll help you get out of a stun a lot faster when one does happen. Your minor Pantheon choice is really up to you on this character. Lots of different ones could apply in different situations. I found myself using Soul of Shikari most of the time in this league in particular, just because some of the Syndicate members put out really nasty chaos damage, so I found that 5% reduced chaos damage was really useful, and immunity to poison is a really nice upgrade if you feel like killing Shikari in the T15 map. That pretty much does it for this build guide. We'll leave it short and sweet since this really is a relatively simple character with very simple gearing requirements. I'll leave you with some footage of a Shaper kill here in the background. I'll just show you the final phase and the final unshaped phase as well. Shaper should be really easy for you once you understand the fight on pretty much any ranged character with decent DPS, and this character's no exception. Most of the Guardians are quite easy as well. Minotaur, Hydra, and Phoenix all go down really easy on this character, again as they should really on any ranged character with decent DPS. However, if you want to do Chimera, this character is definitely not the right character for it. It is all but impossible to do Chimera on this character because you are super squishy and Chimera just uses Flicker Strike on you repeatedly, so you really can't avoid damage, and this character is not a character for any sort of encounter that requires face tanking. Regarding the general playstyle of the character, it really is very simple. You just hold down your Castle Channeling Lightning Warp setup, move through the map. Sometimes Lightning Warp can be a little clunky, especially if there's lots of obstacles in the way because the targeting on Lightning Warp is a little weird. Make sure you just spam your flasks as you go along. They'll refill right away as you shatter up giant packs, and try to focus on going for wide open maps, as there where this build really shines, rather than trying to navigate your way through little hallways and doorways using Lightning Warp. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something interesting and been encouraged to go out and try a new build, whether it be this or any other build you can think of. The main goal of my videos is to inspire people to be creative, rather than so much having them cookie cutter exactly the build I'm presenting. If you'd like to support this channel, the best way you can do that is simply by watching the videos, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. If you do want to support the channel more directly, I'll leave a link to my Patreon in the video description as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in Rayclast.